The rain pattered against my windshield like tiny fingertips, desperate to be let in. I squinted through the blur, searching for the right address among the towering apartment buildings that stretched toward the charcoal sky. My phone's GPS kept recalculating, as lost as I was in this wealthy part of town where I rarely ventured. Damn it, I muttered, wiping condensation from the inside of my car window. This delivery was already 20 minutes late, and my rating couldn't take another hit. 3 stars last week, and Dine Dash would cut me loose, leaving rent unpaid again. I pulled up to the gleaming high-rise, its glass and steel facade reflecting the storm clouds. Sunset Towers. This was it. The doorman raised an eyebrow at my beaten Honda, but buzzed me in when I flashed the delivery bag. Suite 1701, I said, trying to sound like I belonged. He looked me up and down. My rain-soaked hoodie, faded jeans with a small tear at the knee, hair escaping from what had once been a neat ponytail. Penthouse level requires a security code or resident approval. My heart sank. The customer didn't provide a code. Can you call up? Name on the order? I checked my phone. Williams. He picked up his desk phone, spoke briefly, then nodded. Take the private elevator at the end of the hall. They're expecting you. The elevator was like nothing I'd seen before. Burnished brass fixtures, mirrors on all sides reflecting my disheveled appearance in infinite regression. I tried to fix my hair, but gave up. The wealthy customer would have to deal with a slightly damp delivery girl. They'd forget me the moment I handed over their gourmet pasta. The elevator opened directly into a foyer larger than my entire apartment. Marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and floor-to-ceiling windows displayed a panoramic view of the city below, lights twinkling through the rain like fallen stars. Hello? I called out, my voice echoing. Dine Dash delivery. No answer. I took a few tentative steps forward, my wet sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. The apartment seemed empty, cavernous, like a museum after hours. Hello? Your food is here. I held up the insulated bag as if speaking to ghosts. A door clicked somewhere to my right. I turned toward the sound, expecting a harried business person, impatient for their dinner. Instead, I froze. The man who emerged was not what I expected. Tall, powerfully built, with broad shoulders accentuated by an impeccably tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than my annual income. Dark hair, closely cropped at the sides but longer on top, framed a face that belonged on a Renaissance sculpture, all sharp angles and perfect symmetry. But it was his eyes that stopped my breath. Dark as midnight, observant, missing nothing. He wasn't alone. 2 men flanked him, one checking something on a sleek phone, the other scanning me with a gaze that made me feel like I was being x-rayed. I don't have a food order, the man in the center said, his voice a low, controlled rumble that seemed to vibrate through the marble beneath my feet. I fumbled with my phone. I have a delivery for Suite 1701, Williams. This is Suite 1707, he replied, a slight accent coloring his words. Italian, perhaps. Petrov. My stomach dropped. Wrong suite. The doorman had misheard or misunderstood. I was standing in a stranger's penthouse, dripping rainwater on his imported marble. I'm so sorry, I stammered, backing toward the elevator. Complete mix-up. I'll just... Wait. The single word carried the weight of a command, stopping me as effectively as a hand on my arm. The man, Petrov, studied me with those penetrating eyes. What's your name? Emma. I replied automatically, then wished I hadn't. Something about him made me want to be anonymous. Forgettable. He took a step closer, and I caught his scent. Expensive cologne with undertones of sandalwood and something uniquely masculine. One of his companions moved to a position near the elevator, blocking my exit without seeming to do so. Emma, Petrov repeated, as if testing how my name felt on his tongue. You look cold. And that food will get cold too. Williams can wait a few minutes. My delivery bag suddenly felt heavy. I really should go. They're waiting, and I've already mixed up the address. Sit. He gestured to a modern sofa that probably cost more than my car. Anton, get her a towel. The quieter of his 2 companions disappeared and returned moments later with a plush white towel. I didn't move to take it, Look, Mr. Petrov, I appreciate it, but I need to deliver this food. My job depends on it. I tried to sound firm, but my voice wavered. Something flashed in his eyes. Amusement? Interest? Your dedication is admirable, but I insist. It wasn't a request. I found myself perched on the edge of his sofa, clutching the delivery bag to my chest like a shield. Anton draped the towel over my shoulders without touching me. Petrov sat across from me in a leather armchair, unbuttoning his suit jacket with a casual elegance that spoke of money and power. Up close, I noticed a thin scar that ran along his jawline, the only imperfection in his otherwise flawless face. So, Emma, you deliver food to pay your bills. It wasn't a question. Among other things, I replied vaguely, not wanting to reveal how close to financial ruin I really was. Full-time delivery driver, part-time barista, occasional dog walker, and still barely making rent. And what else do you do? His gaze was intense, analyzing every micro-expression on my face. I'm studying nursing, I said, wondering why I was sharing this with a stranger. Night classes. Something shifted in his expression. Noble profession. Caring for others. I shrugged, uncomfortable with his scrutiny. It's practical. Steady work. My phone buzzed. A text from DineDash. Customer Williams reporting order not delivered. Please update status immediately. I stood abruptly. I really have to go. They're complaining about the delay. Petrov smiled, a predatory curve of his lips that didn't reach his eyes. Of course. Dmitri will show you to the correct suite. The larger bodyguard stepped forward, his expression neutral. That's not necessary, I protested. I insist, Petrov said again, in that same tone that brooked no argument. We wouldn't want you getting lost again. As Dmitri led me to the elevator, I felt Petrov's eyes on me, a physical weight between my shoulder blades. Just as the doors began to close, he spoke again. Emma, perhaps you delivered to the wrong suite, but you arrived at precisely the right door. We'll see each other again. The elevator doors sealed shut, cutting off my view of his confident smile. I exhaled shakily, realizing I'd been holding my breath. Dmitri said nothing as we descended one floor and walked down a plush hallway to suite 1601, not 1701 as I'd thought. He knocked once, waited for the door to open, nodded to the confused customer, and disappeared back toward the elevator without a word. You're late, the actual Mr. Williams complained, grabbing the bag from my hands. I'm sorry. There was a mix-up with the suite number, I explained, but he was already closing the door, leaving me alone in the hallway. As I rode the regular elevator down to the lobby, my hands were still trembling. Something about Petrov had unsettled me deeply, not just his obvious wealth and power, but the way he had looked at me. Not as the invisible delivery girl that most customers saw, but as if he was memorizing every detail of my face, as if I was something valuable he'd discovered unexpectedly. I stepped out into the rain, which had intensified to a proper downpour. My phone buzzed with another delivery assignment, but I hesitated before accepting it. Perhaps you delivered to the wrong suite, but you arrived at precisely the right door. A shiver that had nothing to do with the cold rain ran through me as I slid into my car. Something told me that my innocent mistake had set something in motion that I couldn't stop, like stepping onto a treadmill that was already moving too fast. I pulled away from the curb, glancing up at the penthouse windows. For a moment, I thought I saw a silhouette watching from above, but it was gone so quickly, I convinced myself it was just a trick of the rain and city lights. How wrong I was. I didn't sleep well that night. Rain continued to batter my tiny studio apartment, finding its way through a leak in the corner that my landlord had promised to fix months ago. I placed a pot underneath to catch the drips, their rhythmic pinging keeping time with my racing thoughts. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Petrov's face, that calculating gaze, the way his presence had filled the room. I told myself I was being ridiculous. He was just another wealthy customer, probably used to people jumping at his commands. I'd never see him again. My alarm blared at 5:30 a.m. Friday meant morning shift at Blackbird Cafe before afternoon deliveries. I dragged myself out of bed, trying to ignore the heaviness in my limbs from too little sleep. The face that greeted me in the bathroom mirror looked haunted. Dark circles under bloodshot eyes, skin pale from exhaustion. Get it together, Emma, I muttered, splashing cold water on my face. He was just a guy. A scary, intense, impossibly handsome guy with bodyguards, but still just a guy. The cafe was already bustling when I arrived. I tied my apron with practiced movements, nodding to Zoe, my manager, who was balancing 3 plates of avocado toast. "You look like hell," she remarked, sliding past me toward a table of young professionals. "Thanks," I replied dryly. "Rough night." The morning passed in a blur of espresso shots and pastries. By 11, my feet were already aching, but I had another 5 hours before I could start my delivery shift. I was wiping down the counter when the bell above the door chimed. "Welcome to Blackbird," I said automatically, not looking up. "I'll be with you in a second. Take your time, Emma." My head snapped up at the sound of that voice, deep, slightly accented, and unmistakable. Petrov stood just inside the door, as out of place in our hipster cafe as a wolf in a petting zoo. Today he wore a navy suit that made his shoulders look even broader, a crisp white shirt open at the collar. No tie. The same 2 men flanked him, though they stayed near the entrance while he approached the counter. "What are you doing here?" The words tumbled out before I could stop them. One corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been amusement. "Getting coffee, presumably. That's what one does in a cafe." My face flushed hot. "Right. Of course. What can I get you?" "Americano." "Black." He glanced at the pastry case. "And whatever you recommend." My hands trembled slightly as I prepared his coffee. "The almond croissants are good," I offered, trying to sound normal. "Made fresh this morning. Then I'll have one." I felt his eyes on me as I worked, studying every movement. The weight of his attention made me fumble with the espresso machine. "That'll be $8.75, I said, pushing the coffee and bagged pastry across the counter. He handed me a $100 bill. "Keep the change." I stared at the bill. "We can't accept this. Company policy on large bills." It was a lie. We could break hundreds. I just didn't want his money. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. He pulled out a sleek wallet and replaced the 100 with a 20. "Better?" I rang up his order and handed back his change, careful not to let our fingers touch. He made no move to leave. "Was there something else?" I asked, uncomfortably aware of Zoe watching us from across the room. "I have a proposition for you." His voice was low, meant only for me despite the busy cafe. My stomach clenched. "I'm not interested. You haven't heard what it is. I don't need to." I busied myself wiping down the already clean counter. "I'm not available for propositions." He laughed then, a rich sound that drew several pairs of eyes our way. "I'm not propositioning you, Emma, at least not in the way you're thinking." Heat crawled up my neck. "Then what do you want?" "I'm hosting a dinner tonight. My chef has fallen ill. I need someone to serve the meal and clean up afterward. The pay is $2,000 for 5 hours of work." I froze. $2,000? For serving dinner? "It's an important dinner. The guests are particular." He took a sip of his coffee. "You impressed me yesterday. You're clearly hardworking, responsible, and discreet, I hope." The sum was staggering, more than I made in 2 weeks of combined jobs. It would cover my rent and put a dent in my tuition payment. But something felt wrong. "Why me? Why not hire a professional server? Short notice." He replied smoothly. "And as I said, you made an impression." "What kind of dinner is this?" I asked suspiciously. "Business associates. Nothing illicit, I assure you." His eyes held mine. "Just serving food and pouring wine. You'd arrive at 7, leave by midnight." Every instinct told me to refuse. I knew nothing about this man except that he lived in a penthouse and had bodyguards. But $2,000. "I have deliveries scheduled tonight," I said weakly. "Cancel them. I'll compensate you for the lost income." Zoe appeared at my side. "Everything okay here?" "Fine," I said quickly. "Mr. Petrov was just leaving." He smiled at Zoe, charm personified. "Your employee is excellent. You should give her a raise." Zoe blinked, clearly taken aback by his presence. I'll take that under advisement." Petrov turned back to me. 7 o'clock. Same address as yesterday. He slid a business card across the counter. "My private number, should you need it." I didn't take the card. "I haven't said yes. You will." He picked up his coffee and pastry. Wear black if possible. Professional attire. Before I could respond, he was gone, his bodyguards falling into step behind him. A sleek black Bentley waited at the curb, a driver opening the door. I watched through the window as they pulled away. Holy shit, Zoe breathed beside me. Who was that? Just a customer, I murmured, still staring at his business card. It was simple, expensive cardstock with just his name, Alexei Petrov, and a phone number. Yeah, right. Just a customer who rolls up with security and offers you a private gig. She nudged me. Is he famous or something? I shook my head. I don't think so. Just rich. Well, whatever he's offering, be careful. Zoe's expression turned serious. Men like that are used to getting what they want. Her warning echoed my own misgivings, but the thought of $2,000 kept pushing them aside. With my student loans accumulating interest and my car making a concerning noise, could I afford to turn it down? The rest of my shift passed in a daze. I kept reaching for the business card in my pocket, running my thumb over the embossed lettering. By the end of the day, I'd made my decision. I texted Dindash that I was sick and wouldn't be making deliveries, then headed home to find something appropriate to wear. My wardrobe wasn't exactly filled with professional attire. I finally settled on a black skirt that fell just above my knees, a white button-down shirt, and the only decent shoes I owned, plain black flats. I pulled my hair into a neat bun and applied minimal makeup, trying to look older than my 24 years. As I approached Sunset Towers for the second time, my heart hammered against my ribs. The same doorman recognized me, his eyebrows rising slightly. Suite 1707, I said before he could ask, proud that my voice remained steady. He nodded. Mr. Petrov is expecting you. The private elevator felt even more intimidating than it had yesterday. As it ascended, I rehearsed what I would say. I was here to work, nothing more. Clear boundaries. Professional distance. All my prepared words evaporated when the doors opened. The penthouse had transformed. Subtle lighting cast a warm glow over the space. A large dining table had been set up near the windows, elegantly arranged with fine china and crystal glasses that caught the light. Soft classical music played from hidden speakers, and there was Petrov, standing in the center of it all, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He'd changed into a black suit that fit him like a second skin, emphasizing his powerful build. He turned as I stepped in, his eyes sweeping over me in a single assessing glance. You came, he said, satisfaction evident in his tone. For work. I clarified immediately. Just work. Something like amusement flickered across his features. Of course. Anton will show you the kitchen and explain your duties. The quieter bodyguard materialized at my side, gesturing for me to follow. As we walked away, I felt Petrov's eyes on my back. That same weight I'd felt yesterday, like being watched by a predator who hadn't yet decided whether to pounce. The kitchen was a chef's dream, all gleaming stainless steel and marble. A middle-aged woman was putting the finishing touches on what appeared to be appetizers. This is Irina, Anton explained in a clipped accent. She has prepared everything. You will serve and clear dishes, pour wine, and stay attentive but invisible. Understood? I nodded, glad to have another woman present. How many guests? 6, plus Mr. Petrov. His expression remained impassive. The guests will arrive in 30 minutes. Irina will guide you. He left, and Irina gave me a tight smile. First time working for Mr. Petrov? Yes. Do you work for him regularly? She shook her head. My husband is his driver. I help sometimes. She lowered her voice. Be careful tonight. These men. They are not normal businessmen. Before I could ask what she meant, the doorbell chimed. Irina straightened. They arrive early. We begin now. Follow my lead. The next hour was a blur. Men in expensive suits arrived one after another, each with their own security who remained in the foyer. Petrov greeted them all with the same controlled cordiality, speaking a mixture of English and what sounded like Russian. I served appetizers, then soup, keeping my eyes down, trying to be invisible as instructed. It was during the main course that I made my mistake. I was refilling a wine glass when I overheard a snippet of conversation. The shipment from Belarus was intercepted, one man said quietly. Someone talked. Find out who, Petrov replied, his voice suddenly hard as steel. Make an example. The man nodded, then noticed me standing there. He fell silent, his eyes narrowing. I moved away quickly, but the damage was done. I'd heard something I shouldn't have. In the kitchen, I leaned against the counter, heart racing. What kind of business were they discussing? What example were they planning to make? You look pale, Irina observed, preparing dessert plates. I'm fine, I lied. Just tired. When I returned to the dining room with dessert, Petrov's eyes found me immediately. I could feel his attention throughout the rest of the meal, though he never addressed me directly. As the guests departed around 11, I began clearing dishes, eager to finish and leave. The atmosphere had grown oppressive, charged with something I couldn't name, but that made my skin prickle with awareness. I was stacking plates in the kitchen when I sensed a presence behind me. I turned to find Petrov standing in the doorway watching me. You overheard something earlier, he said. Not a question. I swallowed hard. I didn't hear anything important. Don't lie to me, Emma. He stepped closer. It doesn't suit you. I'm almost finished here, I said, changing the subject. I'll be out of your way soon. Did I say I wanted you gone? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with implication. He moved closer still, until I could smell his cologne and the faint scent of whiskey on his breath. The dinner went well, he continued when I didn't respond. You did your job admirably, thank you. I tried to step around him. If you'll excuse me, his hand shot out, fingers wrapping around my wrist, not painfully but with enough pressure to stop me in my tracks. His touch sent an electric current up my arm. What I said yesterday was true, he murmured. You delivered to the wrong suite, but you arrived at exactly the right door. His eyes held mine, dark and intent. For one breathless moment I thought he might pull me closer. Instead, he released me and stepped back. Finish up here. Dmitri will drive you home. That's not necessary, I said quickly. I have my car. It's not a request. His tone left no room for argument. It's late. The city isn't safe. With that, he turned and left the kitchen. I exhaled shakily, realizing I'd been holding my breath. What had just happened? What was this power he seemed to have over me, rendering me speechless with just a look? I finished cleaning as quickly as possible, wanting nothing more than to escape the penthouse and its enigmatic owner. As promised, Dmitri was waiting for me when I finished, car keys in hand. Ready? He asked, his first word to me all night. I nodded, following him to the elevator. As the doors closed, I caught a final glimpse of Petrov standing in his living room, glass in hand, watching me leave with those impenetrable dark eyes. I'd survived the evening, earned my money, and would never have to see Alexei Petrov again. If only fate were that kind. The envelope Dmitri handed me before I exited his car contained exactly $2,000 in crisp $100 bills. I'd never held so much cash at once. It felt illicit somehow, even though I'd earned it legitimately. At least that's what I told myself, as I hid it in my apartment, tucking it beneath the loose floorboard under my bed where I kept my emergency fund. Sleep eluded me again that night. Petrov's words echoed in my mind. Make an example. What had he meant? What kind of business was he really in? My phone pinged with a text message at 3 a.m. Unknown number. You left something behind. My heart skipped. I hadn't left anything at Petrov's penthouse. I was certain of it. Another message followed. Your professionalism impressed my guests. There will be another dinner next Friday. Same terms. Alexei Petrov. It had to be. He'd somehow obtained my number, which shouldn't have surprised me, yet sent a chill down my spine. I didn't respond, placing my phone face down on the nightstand. But the promise of another $2,000 lingered in my thoughts. With that kind of money coming in regularly, I could cut back on delivery hours, focus more on my studies, maybe even start saving for a better apartment. Dawn found me still awake, staring at the ceiling. I had morning classes, then an afternoon shift at the cafe. I needed to function. Professor Martinez's lecture on pharmacology might as well have been in a foreign language. I struggled to focus, my notes a jumbled mess of half-finished sentences. Afterward, Lisa, my study partner, cornered me in the hallway. "What's going on with you?" she demanded, her nurse-in-training instincts already diagnosing my condition. "You look like you haven't slept in days." I shrugged. "Just working a lot. You know how it is." "You're working too much. It's going to affect your grades." She peered at me more closely. "Are you in some kind of trouble? You know you can talk to me, right?" "I'm fine," I insisted, forcing a smile. "Just tired." The truth was too complicated to explain. How could I tell her about Petrov, about the strange pull he exerted over me, simultaneously attracting and terrifying me? The cafe was mercifully quiet that afternoon. I moved through my tasks automatically, making lattes and serving pastries while my mind wandered elsewhere. It wasn't until Zoe snapped her fingers in front of my face that I realized she'd been trying to get my attention. "Earth to Emma. There's someone here for you." I turned toward the counter and froze. Not Petrov this time, but Dmitri, his imposing bodyguard, standing out in our little cafe like a sequoia in a flower garden. "Miss Emma," he said with a slight nod, "Mr. Petrov requests your presence." Zoe raised an eyebrow at me, silently asking if I needed help. I shook my head slightly. "I'm working," I told Dmitri. "My shift doesn't end for 3 hours. Mr. Petrov has spoken with your manager. You are excused for the remainder of the day." I glanced at Zoe, who looked as confused as I felt. "He called the owner directly," she confirmed. "Paid for your entire shift plus extra." "What the hell is going on, Emma?" "Nothing," I said quickly. "Just a private client." Dmitri waited impassively while I untied my apron and grabbed my bag from the back room. Zoe followed me. "This is getting weird," she whispered. "Are you sure you're okay? Do you need me to call someone?" "It's fine," I assured her, though my churning stomach suggested otherwise. "Just a job opportunity. I'll tell you about it later." Outside, the same black Bentley waited at the curb. Dmitri opened the rear door, and I slid in, half expecting to find Petrov inside. Instead, the back seat was empty. "Where are we going?" I asked as Dmitri pulled away from the cafe. "Shopping," he replied curtly. "Shopping? For what?" "Mr. Petrov will explain." We drove to the most exclusive shopping district in the city, where boutiques had no price tags and doormen guarded the entrances. Dmitri parked in front of a store with a minimalist facade and a single evening gown displayed in the window. The kind of place I'd walk past without a second glance, knowing I could never afford anything inside. "Wait here," Dmitri instructed, getting out and speaking briefly to someone at the door. A moment later, a slender woman in an impeccable black dress emerged with him. She approached the car as Dmitri opened my door. "Miss Emma?" Her smile was professional, practiced. "I'm Margot. Mr. Petrov has arranged a private consultation for you. Please come inside." I stepped out, feeling woefully underdressed in my jeans and cafe polo shirt. "There's been a misunderstanding. I'm not here to shop." Mr. Petrov was very clear about his requirements. Margot gestured toward the boutique. "We've closed the store for your appointment." Closed the entire store? Just for me? The extravagance was staggering. I glanced at Dmitri, who stood impassively by the car. "What exactly am I shopping for? An evening gown, accessories, and appropriate undergarments," Margot replied smoothly. "For an event this evening." "This evening?" My voice rose in pitch. "I don't remember agreeing to anything tonight." "Mr. Petrov said you would say that." A hint of amusement colored her tone. "He also said to remind you that it would be worth your while." Inside, the boutique was a temple of luxury, plush seating, champagne and crystal flutes, and clothing that looked like it belonged in a museum rather than on a human body. Margot led me to a private dressing room larger than my bathroom. "Mr. Petrov provided your measurements and some guidelines on style and color," she said, selecting several gowns from a rack. "He prefers darker shades, burgundy, navy, emerald. Nothing too revealing, but nothing that hides your figure either." My head spun. "He gave you my measurements? How would he even know my measurements?" Margot smiled enigmatically. "Mr. Petrov is very observant." The thought of Petrov studying my body closely enough to estimate my size sent heat rushing to my face. It was invasive, presumptuous. And yet, a small part of me was flattered by his attention. I tried on gowns worth more than my car, each one more beautiful than the last. Margot insisted I try them all, even when I found one I liked. A deep burgundy silk that draped elegantly across my body, making me look taller, more sophisticated. "This one," I said finally, turning in front of the three-way mirror. The woman reflected there hardly looked like me. She was elegant, mysterious, almost regal. "Excellent choice," Margot approved. "Now for shoes, jewelry, and underpinnings." 2 hours later, I was transformed. The burgundy gown hugged my curves before flowing to the floor in a subtle train. My hair had been styled by the boutique's personal stylist into soft waves that framed my face. Delicate gold jewelry adorned my neck and ears, and makeup enhanced my features, while still looking natural. Even my nails had been professionally manicured. "Mr. Petrov will be pleased," Margot said, surveying her handiwork. "I still don't know where I'm going or what I'm doing," I protested as she ushered me toward the exit. "The opera," Dmitri answered, appearing at my side. "Mr. Petrov is waiting." The opera. Me. In a gown that probably cost thousands, heading to meet a man who made my heart race with a mixture of fear and something else I didn't want to name. The Bentley whispered through evening traffic toward the Grand Opera House, its illuminated facade glowing against the darkening sky. A line of well-dressed patrons waited to enter, but Dmitri drove past the main entrance to a private side door. A red carpet stretched from the curb. "Ready?" Dmitri asked, opening my door. No, I wasn't ready. Nothing in my life had prepared me for this moment. But I stepped out anyway, gathering the skirt of my gown with trembling fingers. And there was Petrov, waiting at the entrance. Tonight he wore a classic tuxedo that accentuated his broad shoulders and trim waist. His dark hair was impeccably styled, his jaw freshly shaved. He looked like he'd stepped out of a luxury watch advertisement, devastating in his perfection. His eyes widened slightly when he saw me, the only crack in his composed facade. For a heartbeat, he simply stared, something like hunger flashing in his gaze. "Emma," he said finally, his voice a low rumble. "You look exquisite." "You had no right," I said quietly as I approached. "No right to pull me from work, to buy me clothes, to arrange all this without my consent." "You're angry." He seemed more intrigued than concerned. "I'm not a doll you can dress up and parade around." "No," he agreed. "You're far more interesting than that." He offered his arm. "Shall we? The performance begins soon." I should have turned around, gotten into a taxi, and gone home. Instead, I placed my hand on his arm, feeling solid muscle beneath the fine fabric of his sleeve. "Why am I here, Mr. Petrov?" I asked as he led me inside. "Alexei," he corrected. "And you're here because I want you to be." We entered a private box overlooking the stage. Champagne waited on ice, along with delicate canapés. It was like stepping into a different world, one of privilege and beauty so far removed from my daily existence that it felt unreal. "You haven't answered my question," I persisted as he poured champagne into crystal flutes. "Why me? You could have anyone." He handed me a glass, his fingers brushing mine deliberately. "Perhaps that's precisely why. I can have anyone, as you say. But you..." His eyes traveled over my face, lingering on my lips. "You don't want anything from me. I took your money," I reminded him. "For honest work. Not because you wanted access to my world or my connections." He sipped his champagne. "Do you know how rare that is in my life, Emma? Authenticity, honesty." Before I could respond, the lights dimmed, and the orchestra began tuning. Petrov guided me to our seats, his hand at the small of my back sending electricity up my spine. The opera was La Traviata, the tragic tale of a courtesan who falls in love with a man above her station, sacrificing her own happiness for his. The irony wasn't lost on me. Throughout the performance, I was acutely aware of Petrov beside me, the heat of his body, the subtle scent of his cologne. Occasionally, his thigh would brush against mine, and my breath would catch. During intermission, he introduced me to several people who stopped by our box, wealthy patrons who regarded me with curiosity, and him with deference. I noted how they addressed him, with respect tinged with fear. Who was this man, really? As the final act began, Petrov leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. The tragedy of Violetta is that she believes herself unworthy of true happiness. His words lingered in my mind as we watched the heroine's death scene. When the final curtain fell, I was surprised to find tears on my cheeks. You were moved, Petrov observed as we left the opera house. It's a beautiful story, I admitted. Sad, but beautiful. Beauty and sadness often walk hand in hand. His gaze was intense, searching. Are you hungry? Before I could answer, Anton appeared beside us. Sir, there's a situation that requires your attention. Petrov's expression hardened instantly. He nodded once, then turned to me. I apologize, Emma. Business calls. Dmitri will take you home. What kind of business needs attention at 11 at night? I asked, suspicion flaring. The demanding kind. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I'll be in touch. He kissed my hand, a formal gesture that nonetheless left my skin burning where his lips had touched. Then he was gone, disappearing into a waiting car with Anton. Dmitri escorted me to the Bentley, his face revealing nothing. As we drove through the night-shrouded city, questions tumbled through my mind. What situation had called Petrov away? Was it connected to what I'd overheard at the dinner? Dmitri, I ventured, what does Mr. Petrov do, exactly? His eyes met mine briefly in the rearview mirror. He has many business interests. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you need, Miss Emma. His tone was final. When we reached my apartment building, a stark contrast to the luxury I'd been surrounded by all evening, Dmitri insisted on walking me to my door. I felt ridiculous entering my shabby building in a designer gown, like Cinderella returning from the ball. Mr. Petrov asked me to give you this, Dmitri said, handing me an envelope similar to the one from the previous night. Inside was another stack of cash, $3,000 this time, and a handwritten note on heavy cardstock. For your time and company, the gown is yours to keep. I can't accept this, I said, trying to return the envelope. I didn't do anything to earn it. Mr. Petrov disagrees. Dmitri stepped back toward the car. He values your presence. After he left, I sank onto my lumpy sofa, still wearing the beautiful gown, the envelope clutched in my hand. What was happening to me? To my life? 24 hours ago, I'd been a struggling student with too many jobs and too little time. Now I was sitting in a designer dress, holding enough cash to pay next semester's tuition, all because a dangerous, enigmatic man had taken an interest in me. My phone pinged with a text message. Did you enjoy the opera? Petrov again. I hesitated before responding. Yes, thank you. But I can't accept the money. His reply came quickly. It's not negotiable. Consider it compensation for the interrupted evening. I stared at the screen, debating whether to respond. Finally, I typed, What kind of business calls you away at 11 p.m.? There was a long pause before his answer appeared. The kind that's better for you not to know about, Emma. Get some rest. I changed out of the gown, hanging it carefully in my closet where it looked absurdly out of place among my jeans and work clothes. As I prepared for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror, still wearing the delicate gold necklace Petrov had provided, a glittering reminder of the evening. I should have taken it off. Instead, I touched it gently, remembering the intensity in his eyes when he'd first seen me in the gown. No one had ever looked at me like that before, like I was precious and desirable and somehow necessary. It was dangerous, this feeling. More dangerous than anything else about Alexei Petrov. My phone pinged one last time as I climbed into bed. Sweet dreams, Emma. I'll see you soon. It wasn't a question or a request. It was a statement of fact, as inevitable as the sunrise. And God help me, I was looking forward to it. 3 days passed without word from Petrov. I tried to return to normal life, attending classes, working shifts at the cafe, even picking up a few delivery runs, but everything felt different somehow, as if the world had shifted slightly on its axis. I kept the cash he'd given me, despite my misgivings. Practical necessity won out over pride. I paid my rent, made a tuition payment, and even splurged on decent groceries for once. Each time I spent his money, though, I felt the invisible threads binding me to him tighten. "You seem distracted," Lisa commented during our study session at the library. "And you're wearing different clothes, new jewelry." Her eyes narrowed. "Did you meet someone?" I touched the gold necklace I still hadn't taken off. "It's nothing serious." "Oh my God, you did." She leaned forward eagerly. "Who is he? How did you meet?" How could I explain Alexei Petrov? I delivered food to the wrong address, and now a mysterious, dangerous man with bodyguards is taking me to the opera. It sounded deranged even in my head. "It's complicated," I hedged. "We're not really dating." "But you want to be," she pressed, reading my expression. "I haven't seen you this wound up over a guy since that disaster with Ryan last year." Ryan, my ex who'd cheated with my roommate, leaving me heartbroken and homeless in one fell swoop. The memory still stung. "This is different," I murmured. "Different good? Or different bad?" "Both. Neither, I don't know." I closed my textbook. "Can we focus on studying? I have an exam next week." Lisa let the subject drop, but her curious glances continued throughout our session. I couldn't blame her. I'd been acting strangely, checking my phone constantly, jumping whenever the cafe door opened, wearing makeup to class for the first time in months. I was waiting for him. Worse, I was hoping for him. Thursday night, I was closing the cafe alone when my phone pinged. "Are you free tomorrow evening?" My heart raced. Petrov. I'd deleted his previous messages but had saved his number. "I have a morning class and work until 4. His response came immediately. "Perfect. Dmitri will collect you at 7. Pack an overnight bag." I nearly dropped my phone. "Overnight bag? We're going to my lake house for the weekend. You'll be back for your Monday classes." The presumption took my breath away. I never agreed to a weekend trip. "You haven't said no either." I stood in the darkened cafe, staring at my phone screen. This was crossing a line. Spending an evening with him was one thing. A weekend was entirely different. I can't just disappear for 3 days. People will worry. "Tell them you're studying with friends. I need you, Emma." Those 3 words, "I need you," sent a shockwave through me. I shouldn't have been affected. It was manipulation, pure and simple. Yet my fingers typed a response before my better judgment could intervene. "Just for the weekend. I'll be ready at 7. What was I doing? This man was dangerous. Everything about him screamed warning. Yet I was packing an overnight bag the next day, selecting clothes with more care than the situation warranted, butterflies dancing in my stomach at the thought of seeing him again. Dmitri arrived precisely at 7, as promised. I'd left a message for Lisa claiming I was spending the weekend with a study group at a lakeside cabin. Not entirely a lie, just a significant omission of who else would be there. The drive took nearly 2 hours, winding through increasingly rural landscapes until we turned onto a private road that snaked through dense forest. Security gates opened automatically as we approached, and soon a sprawling modern structure came into view, nestled on the shores of a pristine lake, its glass walls reflecting the water and surrounding pines. This wasn't a lake house. It was a lake mansion, minimalist architecture blending seamlessly with the natural setting, every element screaming wealth and exclusivity. Petrov waited on the deck, silhouetted against the setting sun. Unlike his usual suits, he wore dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that somehow made him look even more imposing, more real. "You came," he said as I approached, echoing his words from the night of the dinner party. "You didn't really give me a choice," I replied, though we both knew that wasn't true. I could have said no. I'd chosen not to. "There's always a choice, Emma." He took my bag, his fingers brushing mine. "You made the right one." The interior was just as impressive as the exterior. Open-concept living spaces with soaring ceilings, modern furniture that managed to look both expensive and comfortable, and walls of glass that erased the boundary between inside and outside. No bodyguards were visible, though I suspected they weren't far. "It's beautiful," I admitted, gazing at the lake view. "I come here when I need to think, to escape." Petrov placed my bag by the floating staircase. "Few people know about this place." I turned to face him. "Why am I here, Alexei? Really?" He studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "Because you're unexpected." He stepped closer. "In my world, everything is calculated, predicted, controlled. But you're the variable I didn't account for. Is that supposed to make me feel special? I asked, trying to maintain my composure despite his proximity. It should. It means you've disrupted a life I thought was perfectly ordered. His voice dropped lower. It means you've made me question things I never questioned before. Before I could respond, he gestured toward the kitchen. You must be hungry after the drive. I've prepared dinner. You cook? I couldn't hide my surprise. A smile touched his lips. I contain multitudes, Emma. Dinner was simple but exquisite. Perfectly grilled steak, roasted vegetables, and a wine that probably cost more than my monthly rent. We ate at a table overlooking the lake, where the last light of day painted the water in shades of gold and crimson. Petrov asked about my studies, my ambitions, my childhood. He listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions. I found myself revealing things I rarely shared. My mother's death when I was 12, my father's subsequent descent into alcoholism, my determination to build a different life through education. You've overcome much to get where you are, he observed, refilling my wine glass. That kind of resilience is rare. It's not that impressive, I demurred. Lots of people have harder lives than mine. You don't give yourself enough credit. His gaze was intense. You should never apologize for your strength, Emma. The conversation shifted, and I found myself asking about him. His childhood, his business, his life. He spoke of growing up in Russia, of coming to America as a teenager, of building his empire from nothing. But I noticed the careful omissions, the way he redirected questions about exactly what his business entailed. You're being evasive, I pointed out after my third glass of wine had loosened my tongue. What are you hiding? Everyone has secrets, he replied smoothly. Even you. Not like yours. I set down my glass. I overheard something at the dinner party. About a shipment, about making an example of someone. His expression hardened momentarily, then relaxed into a careful neutrality. Business can be complicated, competitive. What kind of business requires bodyguards and making examples of people? The kind that affords me this house. The kind that paid for that necklace you're still wearing. His eyes flicked to the gold chain at my throat. The kind you don't need to concern yourself with. I think I deserve to know who I'm spending the weekend with. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Would the truth change your decision to be here? The question caught me off guard. Would it? If I knew exactly who and what Alexei Petrov was, would I have still climbed into that car tonight? The wine and his proximity muddled my thoughts. I don't know, I answered honestly. Then perhaps it's better not to ask questions you don't truly want answered. After dinner, we moved to the living room. A fire crackled in the modern fireplace, casting dancing shadows across the room. Petrov put on soft jazz, the mournful saxophone echoing my confused emotions. He sat beside me on the sofa, close enough that I could feel his warmth, but not touching. Tell me what you want, Emma. What do you mean? From life. From your career. From this weekend. His eyes reflected the firelight. From me. I stared into my wine glass, buying time. I want to finish my degree, become a nurse, help people. Noble goals. And beyond that? Security, I admitted. I'm tired of worrying about rent and tuition and whether my car will start in the morning. He nodded, understanding. And what do you want from this weekend? My cheeks flushed with heat that had nothing to do with the fire. I don't know. I think you do. His voice was gentle but insistent. I think that's why you came. When I didn't respond, he reached out, his fingers tracing the line of my jaw with feather-light precision. What do you want from me, Emma? The touch sent electricity through me. I should have pulled away. Instead, I leaned into his hand, my eyes closing briefly. I want to understand you, I whispered. I want to know why I can't stop thinking about you, even though everything about you terrifies me. I don't want to terrify you, he murmured, his thumb brushing my lower lip. But you do. You have power over people, over me. I opened my eyes to meet his gaze. And I don't know why I'm drawn to that when I should be running from it. In one fluid motion, he moved closer, his hand sliding to the nape of my neck. Sometimes we're drawn to what challenges us, what forces us to confront parts of ourselves we keep hidden. His face was inches from mine, his eyes dark with desire. I could feel his breath, smell the wine on his lips. Everything in me screamed both warning and invitation. "I won't pressure you," he said softly. "I've wanted you since the moment you stepped into my apartment with that delivery bag. But I can wait." "For what?" "For you to decide that you want me too, completely, without reservation." The honesty of his statement shocked me. I'd expected seduction, perhaps even manipulation, not this raw admission of desire coupled with patience. "Why me?" I asked. The question that had plagued me since our first meeting. "You could have anyone. Because you look at me and see me, not what I can give you." His fingers traced patterns on my skin. "Because you challenge me. Because you're unimpressed by my wealth and unintimidated by my position." "That's not true," I argued. "You intimidate me constantly." A smile touched his lips, yet here you are, telling me to my face that I terrify you. Most people wouldn't dare. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression darkening instantly. "I need to take this," he said, standing abruptly. "Make yourself comfortable. I won't be long." He stepped onto the deck, closing the glass door behind him. Though I couldn't hear his words, his body language spoke volumes, tension radiating from his shoulders, his free hand clenching into a fist, his pacing like a caged predator. This was the other Petrov, the one who made examples of people, the one whose business associates approached him with deference tinged with fear. I moved to the window, watching him. In the moonlight, his features were sharper, more dangerous. He ended the call, stared out at the lake for a long moment, then turned back toward the house. Our eyes met through the glass. I didn't look away. When he re-entered, his expression was carefully composed, but anger simmered beneath the surface. "I apologize for the interruption. Is everything okay?" "Nothing for you to worry about." He returned to the sofa, though he sat farther away than before. "Business complications." I took a deep breath. "Alexei, I need to know what kind of man you are, what kind of business you're really in." He was silent for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I'm in the business of power, Emma. Importing, exporting, shipping, construction, real estate, nightclubs, investments. But at its core, my business is influence, control. Are you—" I hesitated, afraid to say the word. "Am I what?" His voice was dangerously soft. "In the Mafia?" I whispered. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Such an American term, so dramatic." He leaned forward. "I'm a businessman with interests that sometimes operate in gray areas. Areas where conventional rules don't always apply." It wasn't a denial. If anything, it was a confirmation dressed in euphemism. "Have you killed people?" The question escaped before I could stop it. His expression grew serious. "Would the answer change how you feel when I touch you? When I look at you?" "It should," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "But it wouldn't," he countered. "That's what frightens you most, isn't it? Not who I am, but who you are for wanting me despite it." The truth of his words struck me like a physical blow. He'd seen through me completely, identified the core of my conflict. I was attracted to him not in spite of his dangerous aura, but partially because of it. He moved closer again, his hand coming to rest on mine. "I would never harm you, Emma. Never. But you harm others. Only those who deserve it." His fingers entwined with mine. "Only those who break faith with me. And if I break faith with you," I challenged, though my racing heart belied my brave words. Something flashed in his eyes, not anger, but hurt. "You misunderstand me. What I want from you can't be taken, only given freely." "And what is that exactly? You?" he said simply. "Your trust, your honesty, eventually your heart." The intensity of his gaze pinned me in place. In that moment, I recognized the true danger Alexei Petrov posed, not the physical threat of a powerful man with dangerous connections, but the emotional threat of someone who could see through my carefully constructed walls to the vulnerable woman beneath. "I should go to bed," I said, suddenly needing distance. "It's been a long day," he nodded, releasing my hand. "Of course. I've prepared the guest room for you. Upstairs, First door on the right. As I stood, he caught my wrist gently. Emma. I looked down at him, at this beautiful, dangerous man who had disrupted my carefully ordered life. Whatever you decide, he said quietly, know that my interest in you is genuine. Not a game. Not a passing fancy. I nodded, unable to form words around the emotion tightening my throat. In the guest room, I sat on the edge of the king-size bed, running my fingers over the luxurious bedding. The windows offered the same stunning view of the lake, now silver-black under the moon. I changed into the silk pajamas I'd packed, brushed my teeth in the ensuite bathroom with its rainfall shower and heated floors, and tried to process everything that had happened. Alexei Petrov was essentially admitting to being a criminal, a powerful one, possibly dangerous, and yet here I was, in his lake house, undeniably attracted to him, considering crossing a line I'd never be able to uncross. I slipped between the cool sheets, expecting sleep to elude me. Instead, exhaustion claimed me almost immediately, dragging me into dreams filled with dark eyes and gentle hands with hidden strength. I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the scent of coffee. For a moment, I was disoriented, the luxurious surroundings unfamiliar. Then memory flooded back, the lake house, Petrov, our conversation by the fire. After dressing in jeans and a light sweater, I found him on the deck, 2 coffee mugs on the table beside him. He wore running clothes and had a thin sheen of sweat on his brow. "Good morning," he greeted me, his eyes warming at the sight of me. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I expected," I admitted, accepting the coffee he offered. "You've been running?" 5 miles every morning, regardless of where I am." He gestured to the chair beside him. "It clears the mind." I sat, sipping the perfectly prepared coffee. "About last night. You have questions, concerns." He nodded. "It's natural." "I don't know if I can do this," I said honestly. "Be involved with someone like you." "Someone like me," he repeated, his voice neutral. "You mean someone in my position, someone who operates in gray areas, who makes examples of people, who might be dangerous." He considered this, his gaze on the lake. "I won't pretend to be something I'm not, Emma. My world has different rules than yours, but within it, I have a code. Principles I don't break." "What principles?" "Loyalty above all, protection of family and those under my care, keeping my word, never harming the innocent." He turned to face me. "If you decide to be with me, you would fall under my protection. Nothing and no one would ever harm you." "That sounds more like possession than a relationship." A smile touched his lips. "Perhaps there's less difference than you think." The possessiveness in his tone should have repelled me. Instead, it sent a shiver of anticipation down my spine, a reaction that both thrilled and horrified me. What kind of woman was I becoming? The rest of Saturday passed like a dream. After breakfast, Alexei showed me around the property, acres of pristine forest surrounding the lake, a boathouse with sleek watercraft, gardens that blended seamlessly with the wild landscape. We took a small motorboat across the lake, the wind tangling my hair as Alexei navigated with confident ease. For lunch, he prepared a picnic that we ate on a secluded beach, talking about books, music, and art, safe topics that allowed us to know each other without venturing into dangerous territory. In these moments, it was easy to forget who he was, what he did. He seemed like any other man, albeit extraordinarily wealthy and handsome, enjoying a weekend with a woman he was interested in. But occasionally his phone would buzz, and that other Alexei would surface, the one with hard eyes and terse responses, the one who commanded rather than suggested. As evening approached, we returned to the house. I offered to help with dinner, and we worked side by side in the kitchen, moving around each other in a dance that felt surprisingly natural. His hand would brush mine as we reached for ingredients. His body would press briefly against my back as he moved past me, each contact sending electricity through me. "You're distracted," he observed as I nearly dropped a bowl of salad. "What's on your mind?" I set the bowl safely on the counter. "This feels too normal. And that troubles you?" "It should trouble me that it doesn't trouble me more," I said, struggling to articulate my confusion, knowing what I know about you. He turned from the stove to face me fully. What exactly do you think you know? That you're not just a businessman. That you're involved in something illegal, dangerous. Alexei leaned against the counter. The world isn't divided neatly into legal and illegal, Emma. Into good people and bad. Real life exists in the in-between spaces. Philosophy doesn't change reality. Reality is more complex than your black and white view allows. He moved closer. The legitimate businessman who exploits legal loopholes to pay workers poverty wages while he buys a fifth vacation home. Is he good because he breaks no laws? The man who operates outside the law to protect those who depend on him, who creates jobs, who maintains order in places the authorities have abandoned. Is he evil? It's not that simple. No, he agreed, it's not. Nothing important ever is. We ate dinner on the deck, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Alexei opened another bottle of wine, and our conversation flowed more easily with each glass. I found myself laughing at his dry humor, relaxing in his presence despite everything my rational mind was screaming. After dinner, he built a fire in the outdoor fire pit. We sat side by side on a plush outdoor sofa, the flames casting dancing shadows across his features, making him look both more dangerous and more vulnerable. Tell me something true, I said, emboldened by wine and the intimacy of the moment. Something you've never told anyone else. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, staring into the fire, I'm lonely, Emma. I have people around me constantly, employees, associates, sycophants seeking favor. But true connection, understanding, those have always eluded me. The admission caught me off guard with its raw honesty. Is that why I'm here? Because you're lonely? You're here because when you look at me, I feel seen for the first time in years. He turned to face me, firelight reflecting in his dark eyes. Not as Alexei Petrov, the man people fear and respect, but just as a man, with all the flaws and desires that entails. I couldn't look away from his gaze, couldn't break the connection that seemed to tether us together across the small space between us. Your turn, he said softly. Tell me something true. I took a deep breath. I'm scared of how much I want you. It goes against everything I thought I knew about myself, about what I wanted in life. You represent everything I should run from. Yet here I am, running toward you instead. His hand found mine in the darkness, fingers intertwining. We're more alike than you realize, both caught between worlds, both fighting against our natures. What is my nature, according to you? I asked, my voice barely audible above the crackling fire. To be extraordinary, to refuse the ordinary path laid out for you, to crave intensity rather than comfort. As he spoke, he moved closer, until I could feel his breath on my skin. Tell me to stop, Emma, and I will. Tell me you don't want this, want me. And I'll never touch you again. But I couldn't form the words, couldn't deny the truth he saw so clearly. Instead, I closed the remaining distance between us. Pressing my lips to his, the kiss began gently, almost tentatively, but quickly deepened into something hungry, desperate. His hands framed my face with surprising tenderness, even as his mouth claimed mine with unmistakable possession. I melted against him, all my doubts and fears momentarily silenced by the overwhelming reality of his touch. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes had darkened with desire. Be sure, Emma, he said, his voice rough. Be absolutely sure this is what you want, because once you're mine, I won't let you go easily. The possessiveness in his words should have frightened me. Instead, it ignited something primal within me. I'm sure, I whispered against his lips. He stood in one fluid motion, lifting me into his arms as if I weighed nothing. I wound my arms around his neck as he carried me into the house, up the stairs, to the master bedroom I hadn't yet seen. The room was masculine and elegant. Dark wood, crisp linens, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the moonlit lake. He laid me on the bed with unexpected gentleness, looking down at me with an expression that mingled desire with something deeper, more profound. You have no idea how long I've wanted this, he murmured, joining me on the bed. Wanted you. What followed was unlike anything I'd experienced before. Alexei was both passionate and patient, demanding and giving. His hands and mouth seemed to know exactly how to touch me, how to draw responses from my body I didn't know were possible. Throughout, his eyes held mine, forcing a connection that went beyond the physical. Afterward, I lay in his arms, my head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. His fingers traced lazy patterns on my bare skin, raising goosebumps in their wake. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. "Now you sleep," he replied, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "And tomorrow, we return to the city. And then?" He tilted my chin up, making me meet his gaze. "And then you become part of my life, and I become part of yours, if that's what you want." "It's not that simple, Alexei. Our worlds are completely different. They don't have to be." His expression grew serious. "I can help you, Emma. With school, with a better apartment, with anything you need." I stiffened slightly. "I don't want to be your charity case." "That's not what I'm offering," his voice was firm. "I'm offering partnership, support, the kind that people who care about each other provide. And what do you get in return? You." The single word held a wealth of meaning. "Your time, your trust, your presence in my life." I was quiet, considering. "I won't give up my independence, my studies, my goals. I would never ask you to." His arms tightened around me. "I admire your determination, your drive. I want to see you succeed, not clip your wings." We fell asleep tangled together, my doubts temporarily silenced by exhaustion and the comfort of his embrace. Morning came too quickly, sunlight streaming through windows neither of us had thought to cover. Alexei was already awake, watching me with a softness I hadn't seen before. "Good morning," he murmured, brushing hair from my face. Reality began creeping back as the haze of sleep faded. I was in bed with Alexei Petrov. I had crossed a line I could never uncross. He seemed to read my thoughts. "No regrets," he said, kissing me lightly. "What's between us is real, Emma." After breakfast, I packed my few belongings while Alexei made phone calls in his study. The weekend was ending, and the real world waited just beyond the gates of this private paradise. How would whatever was between us translate to everyday life? The drive back to the city was quieter than the journey out. Alexei sat beside me in the back of the car, his hand resting on mine, occasionally lifting it to his lips in a gesture that felt both possessive and reassuring. As we neared my apartment building, anxiety began building in my chest. "When will I see you again? Tonight?" he replied without hesitation. "I have meetings until 7, but I'll come to you afterward." He squeezed my hand. "Unless you need time?" I should have said yes. Should have asked for space to process everything that had happened, everything I'd learned. Instead, "Tonight is fine." Dmitri pulled up to my building. Before I could exit the car, Alexei pulled me close for a kiss that left me breathless. "Until tonight," he murmured against my lips. I nodded, unable to form words around the emotion tightening my throat. As I climbed the stairs to my apartment, I felt like a different person than the one who had left 3 days ago. In many ways, I was. My apartment seemed smaller, shabbier, after the luxury of Alexei's lake house. I unpacked my bag, finding a small box I hadn't placed there. Inside was a delicate platinum bracelet studded with tiny diamonds, and a note in Alexei's bold handwriting, a reminder that what we shared was real. I slipped it on my wrist, the metal cool against my skin. For better or worse, my life had irrevocably changed. I had connected myself to a man who lived by different rules, who operated in shadows I could barely comprehend, a man who made me feel more alive than I ever had before. Later, as I prepared for his arrival, arranging my humble apartment as best I could, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The woman who looked back at me was changed, still recognizably Emma, but with a new confidence in her posture, a new awareness in her eyes. Alexei had awakened something in me that had always been there, dormant, beneath my careful, practical exterior. The buzzer sounded precisely at 7:30. I pressed the button to let him in, my heart racing with anticipation and a strange sense of homecoming. When I opened my door, he stood there with a single red rose, not an elaborate bouquet, but one perfect bloom. His eyes lit with genuine pleasure at the sight of me. "Emma," he said, my name on his lips sounding like both a greeting and a promise. I stepped aside to let him in, into my apartment, into my life, into my heart. Whatever dangers came with loving Alexei Petrov, I would face them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would meet them together. As he pulled me into his arms, I knew with absolute certainty that I had delivered to the wrong address, but arrived at exactly the right door.